Welcome to the Living Superhuman Fitness Podcast, where we take you inside our gym, CrossFit Palm Beach, each week. It's here that we are creating new superhumans every day, transforming people's lives, helping them reach a level of health they never knew possible. We strive to answer your most burning questions on fitness, health, nutrition, training, motivation, mindset, lifestyle, and more. If you have a question, please email us at info@crossfitpalmbeach.com. You can also learn more on our blog, livingsuperhuman.com. And if you have a moment, we'd love a review from you on iTunes. All right, it's time. Let's stop being average and start living superhuman. Hey guys, welcome to CrossFit Palm Beach. My name is Andrew Frezza, and I'm joined today by
Whitney Stevenson,
Tony Frezza,
Steve LaRue.
And today we're going to be talking about how to be stoic AF. And this came about as over the last year, actually Tony, Whitney, and I have all been reading the same book, The Daily Stoic, and now Steve's going through it this year as well, and actually Tony, Whitney, and I are all going through it again because we love it so much. So this is really our favorite book of 2017, something that we've gotten a lot out of. There's also a Daily Stoic journal now that kind of pairs up with the book, which is really cool. So we're going to be talking about some of our favorite Stoic principles, how we've applied it to CrossFit, and just wellness in general. Okay, so let's go into it. Let's dive in. What do we got, Tony? This is something you really wanted to talk about. So give us the first
my jam.
The first one.
I think the first one, the biggest one that has helped me through reading this stuff is focusing on what I can control. And a big part of that is kind of identifying what you can control and what you can't control. I think because a lot of times we think we can control everything, right? You know, but it's really like an art in itself to kind of identify stuff and be able to say, okay, I can't control that. You know, like I'd say like kind of like when you come into the gym, like if an injury happens, you really can't control that. Like maybe you can look back and say I should have warmed up better or whatever, but once it happens, it happened, right? And so like you have to go on from that and just move on the best you can.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember that was one of the biggest things that stuck out to me, both from Stoicism, but also the comp train camp we did with Ben Bergeron was like, you know, defining what's inside your control. It's really your effort, your preparation. It's not, the judge. It's not the person that's working out next to you. It's not, what the coach told you about how to approach the workout. It's really just a few things in terms of effort, preparation, sleep, nutrition, things like that are under your control. And there's freedom in kind of defining that, because you realize there's only a few things that are inside your control, and then you can begin to let go of some of those other things, which is cool.
I think that before I started kind of like understanding what Stoicism was, I always kind of thought that I could control, what was happening. Like what is the event that's happening to me, or what is happening, and then like obviously I can't control what that is, and I would be so focused on that I literally had no control, or I just had no self-awareness of how I was really responding to it, and then an outcome would be, something that I didn't really necessarily want or know how to deal with or know how to move on from. So like just even being able to define like, okay, this is what's happening. All right, this is what I have control over, is my response to whatever is happening. And then when I can control my response, or when I have awareness of my response, that's going to dictate the outcome. Ben Bergeron had the equation like E plus R equals O. The event plus your response is what gives you the outcome. It's not the event itself. It's how you respond to it. It's the combination of the two. And then also, just before we get way too far into this, I just kind of wanted to talk about what Stoicism is a little bit, just because people always tell me my dad is stoic, or you're cold, you're stoic, and I understood stoic as almost like a negative thing, not necessarily like a positive philosophy, and it's impacted my life very positively. And it's not being negative or cold-hearted or emotionless, but it's just being a little bit more like internal and almost at times like a third party to what's going on in your own, being like an observer of your own like emotions, which almost took a lot of pressure off of me when I started doing that, because I was just like, oh, let's see how I'm reacting to this, and like if I like it or not, or if it's, you know, something that I really agree with, or, you know, something that's really, you know, benefiting me. So just to kind of like get that out there, that Stoicism isn't necessarily like being a statue, which is kind of what I thought it was.
Yeah, I think it's more of a persistent like joy or happiness rather than these huge roller coasters of ups and downs. And for people who are used to a huge roller coaster, they can see that person as like lacking joy or lacking pleasure, or so to speak. But it's really that they have just a more consistent high level of it rather than this huge swing and then the depression that comes with that huge swing.
Following off of that, if we backtrack a little bit more as to what it is, just if anybody's listening or watching and you're brand new and this word or this principle is brand new, it's a philosophy from way back when that was established, and Marcus Aurelius was one of the key influences of this. And being somebody who is kind of hot on my sleeve and pretty difficult to have a poker face. You know, if it's a good day, you know it. If it's a bad day, you definitely know it. And my interpretation of what I've learned through these principles so far is that trying to react as neutral as possible to every situation or every event occurring, and maintaining kind of that neutral feeling throughout it, and then your reaction to those events will determine what the outcome is. Again, it's that E plus R. I'm not good at math, but equals O. And having tried to apply that, where I've found difficulty is when you see it in other people, you see events that are outside of, they're not necessarily happening to you, and you know, happening to people around you, and it's easy to, you know, give advice or think, oh, well, you should have reacted in this type of way, versus experiencing something or an event happening to you where it's a case of your first initial instinctive reaction is to do fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And to have that fortitude to stop yourself, take a few steps back and say, okay, let's think about this on a more rational base. Let's respond in a more neutral sense and move forward from there.
Yeah, we always have so much clarity when we help other people with their problems.
Right.
And Stoicism is kind of giving us the clarity within our own problems to address that with kind of some peace of mind and just a more structured approach to it. I love, you kind of brought up our next point, which is that the reaction decides the outcome, not the event itself. And a lot of my experience with this is through following Tony Robbins' material for a long time. And one of the quotes that I love from him is that, you know, there's a saying that people say, oh, we'll laugh about this later. Like, you're in a negative situation, you're struggling, and it's like, oh, we'll laugh about this later. And he says, why not now? You know, why not laugh about this thing now? Why do we have to wait till 10 years from now or till tomorrow to be joyful? There's something we can do in the present moment that's positive that we can focus on. And there's something that we can control to move forward. It's not outside of our control.
Yeah, I think, God, this is something that's really impacted my life, because I'm an impassioned person, and like, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I try to think I don't, but I do. And like, I had an experience the other day where like, I didn't necessarily have like the outcome of something that I wanted, and like my, you know, initial kind of like thought was a little bit of disappointment and being upset. And then you know, by the time I was done with my walk around the building, I was like, okay, what can I do in the next 5 minutes that's gonna help me get closer to my goal? And like, luckily it was like talking to somebody else, and like Drew was there to talk. So it was great. Like, I knew I just needed to like get perspective, talk to somebody else, and then I was already taking action to kind of get me out of that slump. And like I was already making another step towards, you know, my goals, coming back to what my goals are. And I was already gaining perspective and kind of out of that, like, oh, the outcome was negative. And I immediately felt like I had a more positive outcome, just because my response versus, you know, laying on the floor being upset and crying was different. Like I took a little bit of a different action. I thought about some things differently, and, you know, thus the outcome of that whole event was different.
Yeah.
One thing that we see, we coach, we teach, we try and apply is performing something to the point where you don't have to think about it. And if you pull that into the CrossFit world, if you see somebody who comes in and is learning a particular movement for the first time, a technical barbell movement or something gymnastics related where there's a lot of thinking involved in a very short amount of time. If we think about the first time you picked up a bar and you tried snatching, there's so much to think about in an instant. You're going through all those points of performance, you feel gawky, you feel awkward, you're gonna mess it up, and what we hear time and time again is, I just need to think about this less, and it'll come naturally. And with time, you iron out the kinks, everything smooths out a little bit, and that movement does become more fluid. Same with driving a car. You don't have to think about taking your foot off the gas, putting the clutch in, changing gears, taking the foot off the clutch, putting the gas. It just happens naturally, it just flows. And with practice, it becomes elementary and it becomes fluid in the way that we perform things. And you see that with musicians, with artists, with athletes, with entrepreneurs. The way that they are when they're in their element, it just happens, it just flows. And that's when you hear people say, wow, that looked effortless. And that can be seen or applied with the Stoicism and carrying this philosophical principle where you kind of go through the same thought processes over and over and over again. So when you get to that point in your life where an extremely overwhelming situation or event is placed in front of you, you don't have to stop, think, try and control those emotions or try and pull everything in and pull those reins in. It just happens. And that is where there can be a lot of difficulty with something like this, because it's not necessarily a variable we can feel and we can sense. There's not a bar in your hands, or there's not an end result. It's all internal. It's philosophy, and there can be a lot of difficulty with really trying to reach that point of where it just happens. That switch is on, and you know, when those difficult moments come up, having that mental fortitude to just not even have to think about that switch, and it just happens. And I think that's something pretty incredible that we can see with people that follow this practice.
Yeah, I've been going through the daily journal this year. So I've read the Daily Stoic all last year, and now this year I write in the daily journal. And for me, it is like a practice. Like after going through it for a whole year, it's very easy for me to write in the journal. But I could see where someone just picking this up for the first time could get really stuck on like, how would this play out, or how would I react to that? But I feel like I'm kind of already, I don't want to say all the way there because I'm still working on myself, but I'm much further along the way to where this comes out a lot clearer when I'm trying to get those thoughts out on paper.
One of my favorite exercises to kind of go along with journaling and what Steve's saying is defining the worst case scenario for anything, you know? So if you're in a relationship and you're not sure where that's going to go, you have a business, you know, we own a gym, like what is the worst case scenario that could happen, and how can I be prepared for that? And generally, when you define the worst case scenario, you actually put it down. It's not as bad as the thoughts that were running through your head. Once you define it and you see it, you go, oh, okay, that wasn't actually as bad as I thought. Could I handle that if it were to happen? Like, I think we always project out a weaker person than we are today. Like, when we're in a workout, we are tough. I mean, we push through a lot of pain. But when we think about a future workout that's going to be tough, we're like weak in that moment. We get nervous, we get scared. When it's like, wait till you get there, be present, and you'll be ready, like when it comes. And I think if you can define the worst case scenario, realize you'll be strong enough to handle it if it were to come, then it allows you to kind of then step back to the present and then be fully in that present.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, we've talked about it before, how like Ben did that exercise with Katrin and Matt, like creating the worst case scenarios of what was going to happen to them at the CrossFit Games, and then they could understand how many of those things are outside of their control. Exactly, a shark attack, like, you know, putting your hand through a jellyfish, whatever it is, like, you know, they had so many that were out of their control, outside of what they can control, that it really kind of like focuses you or brings you back to like, okay, what can I really be in control of, even when these worst case scenarios are or could possibly be happening. I wanted to talk about an exercise. This is funny. That I did it at I did it at like a personal development seminar. Hopefully they don't like sue us because I'm going to use it, and you have to go through like 2 days of this to like get to this point, but fast forward, we'll get there. But it has to do with what you wrote here, and how Stoicism has a philosophy of like, there technically is like no real good or bad events, it's your perception. So kind of that similar thing, like you have to have your response to get to the outcome, whatever the event is. And you know, that our response is basically our choice. Like we choose to respond to something in a certain way. Like I could have chosen to sulk after my crappy workout the other day, but I chose to do something different and got a better outcome because of it. So this exercise we did was about choice. So we're in this like big hall, like seminar hall, and I get called up, and I'm like sitting with the guy who's like leading the seminar, and he's like, all right, 2 ice cream cones, chocolate or vanilla. And like he didn't even get vanilla out, and I was like, chocolate. And he's like, all right, why chocolate? And I was like, chocolate tastes better. And he's like, wrong. Choose. What do you choose? Chocolate, vanilla, choose. Chocolate. Why do you choose chocolate? Because vanilla sucks. Nope, that's not a choice. Like, and he kept kind of going over, this happened for like 10 minutes where I'd keep choosing chocolate and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't making a choice. And I was actually making a decision. I was like measuring the two. I was like comparing the chocolate to the vanilla, or I was comparing myself with the chocolate, or, so I was always having a good or a bad, basically. I was never just having a choice that was like a free choice. And then eventually, like 10 minutes later, I was like, he's like, chocolate, vanilla, choose. And I was like, chocolate. And he's like, why do you choose chocolate? And I said, because chocolate is my choice. And like literally the whole audience like was like clapping because they were like waiting for me to get it. They apparently had already gotten it, and I finally got it. And so it just kind of goes to show you that your response and your choice is essentially what you can control. That's all you can control, and it doesn't need to be something that's good or bad or measured a certain way, because it's a choice. It's kind of free in its own existence.
Yeah, I think it gave me an idea with workouts, and this is again from that CompTrain seminar, was whenever we get done with a workout, I think a lot of us immediately go into evaluating how we did in that instead of just being proud of the effort we put in, which is usually very good. You know, we put in a lot of effort, and that you can change that conversation immediately and stop getting caught up in the result and evaluating it, and just think about effort that's being put in.
Well, once you're done with that workout, once you're done with that race, once you're done with that event, there's nothing you can do to go back and change it. There's nothing that will control what's already been done. So sure, go ahead, evaluate, assess, and then adjust accordingly, and spend that energy, spend that time on focusing on what is in your control that's going to make you a little bit better for next time. I had a crappy night's sleep, or I was feeling dehydrated. So that's 2 things you can do to improve on next time, rather than worrying that there was 2 seconds between the guy that beat you, or I could have done this set 5 and 7, or I could have gone unbroken, or whatever the case is. There's nothing you can do about that. Assess and reevaluate for the next time around, and that energy put towards the controllable variables and what's ahead of you is gonna again determine that outcome.
Cool. Yeah, and reactions don't have to be like big off the chart reactions like to a open retest. Like, it's every workout you come in here, that's an event, and you have a reaction to it. The first things you tell yourself about that workout are the first things you're going to tell yourself the next time you show up to the gym. You know, if you walk away proud and say, wow, you know, like I did those wall balls really well today in those unbroken sets or whatever it was, you're going to come in that next day feeling like I can do unbroken sets of this movement, these thrusters or whatever it might be, right?
One of the things I'm working on a lot now is seeing obstacles as opportunities. That's kind of the next point we want to talk about. Is it's, you know, Steve kind of mentioned it earlier, is like if you can get that habit down where you're not reacting, I think one of the best associations you can make as a habit is the ability to see adversity, see an obstacle, and not get scared or fearful, but to get excited, because you know, like, okay, that equals growth, that equals me getting better, and that's gonna be a challenge, it's gonna be fun, I'm gonna have to overcome that thing. And that's something I'm working on a lot. I mean, it's gotten better, but that's like the ultimate, if you can get to that point.
Yeah. One of our other coaches gave me a book for Christmas, Tim Ferris?
Tools of Titans?
No, Tribe of Mentors.
Okay, yeah.
I think that's the name.
Yep.
If I'm miscorrect, I'm
That's
sorry.
right.
But the book is like 600 pages. It's huge. And I've read probably half, and it's just a collection of questions that are answered by, you know, amazing human beings on the earth, basically. And one of the questions is, that the majority of them answer is, you know, what is your biggest failure? What did you learn from it?
Yeah.
And I've read probably 300 pages of it, and every single failure, or every single question about their biggest failure, has led to their biggest success. So it's like, wow, like, why wouldn't we seek out to fail? Because we learn so much from it that it will inspire us and motivate us and drive us to a greater success. And like, I've always been afraid of failing and letting other people down, letting myself down, letting my parents down, and it still creeps up inside of me. But knowing that every, like, amazing human beings, like famous, like scientists that have discovered like craziness, and I don't even know half the stuff that they've discovered, but they seek out these failures because they know that it's literally gonna change the course of the earth, because they're gonna create something that's gonna, you know, cure cancer or something else. Like, just the way they approach failure has kind of shifted the way I've been able to think about it, because for the majority of people, their biggest failure has led eventually to this huge success for them.
Who was the guy that invented the light bulb? It was Thomas Edison, right? I don't want to
Yes.
get the names wrong. So he used thousands and thousands and thousands of combinations before he got that specific one right. Apparently, he used the beard hair of one of his assistants to see if that was, like, his combinations were insane, and just people saw him as a genius and saw him as this amazing human being, but they don't take into account that hard, consistent work that went into what that fill-in-the-blank achievement was. And the same goes for anybody, an athlete or whatever the case is, oh, they're so talented, and you're so talented at what you do, it's a gift, but you don't know what the 10, 15, 20 plus years of hard grind, blood, sweat, and tears has been leading up to that point. You just see the kind of the highlight reel of lights, camera, action, and wow, they move so effortlessly, or they're so good at what they do. But if you dig a little deeper into that, what did it really take to get to that point?
And that's why I think Stoicism's gotten so popular recently. It's kind of coming back into pop culture, is because of things like social media, and we're constantly taking our mediocre day or our worst day and comparing it to other people's highlight reels, and we have, you know, hundreds and thousands of highlight reels just sitting right in front of us, and we're always comparing that to our average day or our worst day. And I think that's why these principles have become so important, is because we're constantly being bombarded by the successes of others when we're like over here like, shit, I'm just struggling over all the time.
That comes back to the controllable variables as well. Are you gonna spend 2 hours a day on Instagram scrolling through redundant pictures and videos that aren't going to progress you anywhere, or can you use those 2 hours to prep your nutrition better, or get into bed earlier, or get an extra training session? And that pulls exactly back to control what is within your control.
Yeah, and like, you know, if you have an obstacle in the gym, like say you don't have muscle ups or pull ups, like that's the way. You go and work on them. You do the extra work. You hire personal trainings with one of your coaches to work on it on the side. I mean, I had the worst, hardest time possible with double unders, but I worked on them every single day, and then I wrote a book about double unders, and now I run clinics on double unders. Like, that was the way for me to, like, really dive into something and get through it, and now become one of the better people in the gym at double unders.
Let's talk a little bit about ego. That's a big one that creeps into CrossFit a lot. And the author of The Daily Stoic and the journal, Ryan Holiday, also has a book called Ego is the Enemy, which is another one that we definitely would recommend. But like, I mean, I think that's just like the defining characteristic of success in CrossFit. Like, people just don't stick around in CrossFit if they have a big ego. It's just, the workouts humble you to the point where either you keep your ego and you go back to the other thing you were doing, or you start to lose that ego and you stick around with CrossFit. I just think it's hard for really hard workouts and an ego to coexist from what I've seen. I've heard a lot from other people, like, you know, specifically with our gym, but even gyms all across the country, like there's just so many good people in CrossFit. Like when I go to a CrossFit gym, everyone's so welcoming, everyone's so humble, and I think it's because of the nature of how tough these workouts are.
Well, look at the finish line at the CrossFit Games. I mean, there is just hugs and kisses and camaraderie. And I don't even know what they're doing, but like, it's different than any other sport. I mean, there's something about CrossFit where you can't control what that person next to you is doing. You can't control how fast they're going, right? So you have to do you, and then once it's all said and done, you just celebrate each other, right? And you just say, great job, you did awesome there, right? I mean, that just only happens in CrossFit, where everyone's just cheering each other on.
Yeah, I think like just from like my personal experience and like kind of knowing like, okay, I want to like maximize my life and like my potential on the earth. Like one of the Stoic philosophies is like you could leave Earth at any time, so like maximize what you have. Like if I have an ego getting in the way of that, and like I think I know how to do everything, and I'm not going to let myself be coached, or I'm not going to be vulnerable enough to ask a coach how to do something, or I just think I know it all, like I don't have any room to grow. Like, you know, there's only like a little sliver of a piece of pie of like stuff you know, and then there's like literally 99% more of the pie of everything that you don't know. And if you live in that little tiny piece, you're missing out on like, I wish I had a whiteboard. You're missing out on a whole circle of like to complete that pie of stuff that can make you better. And it could be something that you don't even agree with. It could be something like if you have an ego and it's something you don't agree with, then you're never even gonna try it on. You're never even gonna see if it works.
Excuse me. What's great about this kind of like little subchapter here is we can see it in the coaching side of the fitness industry as well, where you can find egos creep into the coaches, and if you want to prove your coaching ability by, I got this person to do a muscle up, or I got them to snatch X amount, which more often than not will lead to premature injuries or unnecessary injuries, versus knowing that whoever you are in whatever stage of your life, career, etc., there's always somebody who's going to be a little better informed, who's going to have a little more experience, and there's always someone else that's ahead, you know, and that's how we grow and learn. And if you're willing to learn from the people, and even better, I mean, we're in the position where we have amazing people around us every single day, and we all have that opportunity to learn and grow from each other. And that, I feel, from as a coach who's still pretty inexperienced, it's only been a couple years, but there's been so much room to learn from everybody else, and you just push that aside. And like, sure, people are coming to you for advice on training and nutrition and weight loss and lifestyle improvements, but knowing that you can still learn from other people as well, that is something where you just have to put everything else aside and like, I don't know everything. I want to learn more. I want to grow, and let's keep filling the glass that's already half full.
Yeah, that's every coach that we look for. We know they're going to be a good coach if they talk more about what they don't know than what they do know. And that's true with athletes. Like, you have a humble athlete if they're aspiring to the things that they don't have, rather than focusing on the things that they do have and trying to just, beat everyone in that workout that they're particularly good at. There's like a growth curve that I saw. I think I saw it in a book or online the other day, that it's like when you start something new, whether it be a new diet, a new exercise program, learning a new subject, new language, like there's this growth curve where at first you realize you don't know anything because you're a beginner, right? And then at some point you start to get a hang of it and something clicks and you're like, I know it all. Like, I've mastered this thing. And then once you dive deeper past that, then you go, oh my God, there's all these things I didn't know about and I'll never know it all. And I think that's kind of a good sign that you're progressing, is when you get past that growth curve. You've gotten through the point where you got that moment of like, I know everything, to the point where you're now like humbled, and then you're just in that constant pursuit of mastery from
Like
there on.
now you know how much you don't know.
Right.
Like, it's a weird sense of knowing.
Like like as a coach, we'll never know enough about anatomy, or we'll never know about nutrition, because they're discovering new stuff every single day. There's still stuff that, even the smartest doctors that focus on that one area every single day will never know enough about. So as a trainer who's focusing on 5 of those areas or 10 of those areas, we're never going to know that, because, they're still discovering that stuff, So it kind of goes back to how small we are. That's one of the other points we have down there, is like how small we are in this universe. There's still so many things that we're discovering, and if we think we've gotten it down at this point, then we're just kidding ourselves.
We got a last one, gratitude.
Yeah, last one is gratitude for what you already have, and reducing wants to increase happiness, which I think this is cool. It can be applied to, I see it a lot with like nutrition, is like people want to kind of eat a certain way and get in shape, so then they can then have the thing they really want or whatever. Like doing it as a means to an end to something else. So they're kind of like, there's still that pull towards something. Whereas in terms of happiness, if we can reduce the things that are pulling us and outside and just be happy with what we have and grateful for what we have, then we don't need a lot of these outside things.
I love this. I love this chapter. Just a little story that I can personally relate to this a lot is I've grown up racing motorcycles, racing off-road enduros and hare scrambles. And when I pursued moving from South Africa to America, I had a very nice race bike. I had great sponsors. I had it kept going. Nice things that weren't necessary. Good gear. The list goes on, and did not know the appreciation of what we had. We even had great access to riding space. Once I came to America, that was all gone in an instant, along with even more important things like my family being on the other side of the world. And it took a long time to get back to a point where I had the things to pursue my passion and what I love to do. And looking at those things now, it's a case of wow. And it still hits me day to day when I'm prepping my race bike or getting ready to compete, and it's a case of wow, look at this. I'll come home to my wife at the end of the day and I'll tell her I am in awe at what is around us. Look at the the friends that we have, the place that we live. Just it's great to have something that you love and that you're passionate about, and have that pulled away from you to give you perspective on what is already there versus, I need, if I could have this, I'd be better. If I could lose 10 pounds, I'd be a better person inside. And having perspective on what's right in front of you really does humble you, and it's a nice little perspective slap in the face, and it makes you feel kind of, oh gee, if I'd known X amount of years ago, but it also makes you more appreciative for the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you have a quote here that's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like that, the man who's in prison but doesn't see it as prison because he can read every day and he can talk to other people and in his mind he's free, is free, and the guy who's, you know, not in prison but he's married and he has kids but he's in conflict with all of it and he hates his job and he wants to move somewhere else and he wishes, you know, things were different, how he is actually more imprisoned than the literal prisoner. The quote you wrote was, "Freedom isn't secured by filling up on your heart's desire, but by removing your desire." I love that, and it doesn't mean that you have to be less passionate or want things less, but it's just kind of like that. It's kind of like that gut check of like, if you run away from your problems, you're taking your problems with you because it's within you. You know, like I can relate to this a lot because I thought, I'm not from Florida, I'm from California, and I always thought going back to California was going to be the solution to why I hate Florida, or hated Florida. Not anymore, guys.
Just lost half the audience.
So I always was like waiting for my opportunity to move back, you know, home to California. And at one point I was like, you know, no matter where I am, I'm going to be there. So I need to like do some internal work because I could be back home in California and have the same problems and have the same feelings and, you know, still feel the same way I felt in Florida, but now I'm in California and now I feel like even worse because I can't blame it on the heat. Like I have to blame, you know. Mm-hmm. So I just sort of, for me, I started working a lot on, you know, myself, my perspective, my thoughts, you know, creating a life for myself, and a lot of that went away, and now I can happily call this home, which is really cool. Something I never thought I'd be able to do.
Okay, we like you again.
Good save.
You know, in the gym, like, you know, you see these amazing athletes, like, I'll give Whitney props, she's an amazing athlete, just working next to, like, you know, grandmothers and grandfathers, and we're just all ranges. Soon to be.
He's got like 12 kids back in South Africa.
But I think through a Stoic mindset, we're talking about, you know, not being envious of what that better athlete has in their ability toolkit, you know, but being grateful for what you already have. And that's really important to me when I'm coaching someone who's new, to give them their bright spots and shine a light on their bright spots, that they can see, you know, they have a really great squat, or like they have great shoulder mobility or something, that they can like be like, yeah, I am really good at that, and just be grateful for it so that it can build off. Because, you know, jealousy, like it just has no place in a CrossFit gym. Like if you're looking at that whiteboard and you're like, man, I wish that guy got a lower score so I could have beat him today. Like, there's no place for that. You gotta be just grateful for your competition, you know, knowing that your competition is just gonna push you harder.
Definitely. Yeah. Cool. Wrap it up. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. Be more stoic and pick up some of the resources we talked about.